yoga helps us learn how to still the mind and to unify our consciousness. It doesn't matter your cultural background, your race, or your religion, yoga is accessible and approachable for everyone.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this next episode of MindfulText Perspectives. I'm here with Judy Ocondi. She's a certified ERYT 500 yoga teacher, and this means that she's logged over 1,000 hours of teaching, and she specializes in one of the most inclusive types of yoga called Viniyoga. And I'm excited to learn more about her and what she does and share that with our audience here. So welcome, Judy. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for that intro. My intrigue of learning about traditions and origins of yoga began from two ordinary encounters from friends. So my college buddy, Kathy, introduced me to my first yoga studio class out of a Berkeley neighborhood in Denver. And as we entered this small little quaint studio, our teacher, Alana, chanted beautifully with her tambourine, and we moved into this flow of postures, and I was so enchanted and mystified by the whole experience. So from then on, I began to explore yoga from a variety of studios, learning about different lineages. And years after that, our mutual friend, Karen, introduced me to an intense immersion of meditation where we learned breath meditation, body sensation meditation, as well as love and kindness called Metta Bhavana meditation. And it was very transformative. I experienced over a 10-day period a lot of emotions. I went from feeling frightened, scared, sad, even vengeful for my injury, angry, and then I moved into empathy and compassion and forgiveness, and ultimately reached a state of joy and peace. And it felt so wonderful, and I wish everybody could have that experience from meditation. So I really owe to my experience of yoga and meditation from my two friends, Kathy and Karen.
Awesome. So you mentioned a little bit about music in that. I'm wondering, do you use music in your own classes, and how does that play into some of the work that you're doing?
I do use light, gentle, instrumental yoga music in the background to help calm the mind and calm our systems. And so that in general, I usually do if I do an in-person private yoga session. I've noticed that with the pandemic environment, my clients will just play their preferred music, and I recommend that the practitioner, my student, to pick whatever music that resonates with them. The music that I'm referring to from that first yoga experience in Denver is a chant that strikes a chord in the core part of the heart, which is the innermost part of the system of you. So you're represented by multiple layer of systems, you being the physical you out here, moving into the energetic you, Mark, moving into the mental cognitive, moving into the self-reflection, and the deepest part is the spiritual part that we can invoke through chanting or a music that resonates with you.
I've learned a little bit about the science behind yoga, but it sounds like you're mentioning these different levels of progressing through yoga. Is that correct?
Yeah, I describe the whole integrated you, and they all bleed into each other. And through yoga tools, we can address all of those layers or some of those layers, depending on the practitioner and their intention and their boundaries.
Interesting. So Tell us a little bit about Viniyoga. Maybe you could help us understand how Viniyoga fits into the whole landscape of yoga in general.
Yes, well, Viniyoga is a Sanskrit ancient term with the root of meaning differentiation, adaptation, and appropriate application. So the underlying principle, according to the father of modern yoga, T. Krishnamacharya, who came from Madras, India, he said that it is important as a yoga teacher to teach what is appropriate for the individual. So that's the fundamental principle of Viniyoga. Teach what is appropriate for you. And so throughout the 20th century, this father of modern yoga, Krishnamacharya, shared this lineage of Viniyoga. He shared this style among other styles. So he brought a lot of different yoga styles to the Western world, but the Viniyoga one was carried forward further by his son, and his name is TKV Desikachar. Desikachar further refined it with his student, Gary Kraftsow, who's based out of Austin. And this incredible lineage created the art and science of Viniyoga that is known to be very gentle and very safe. Shall I go over the key attributes of Viniyoga, Mark?
Oh, yes, please. That'd be awesome.
Okay, so it's an approach to yoga. Just like when you're hiking and before you're summiting a mountain, there is this approach to summit a mountain. And so yoga is so broad and so deep. One approach is the Viniyoga style that I've learned through my 2 certifications. And so the key differentiators are 4 things. It's the function over form. That's number 1. The breath and the adaptation. Third is the repetition and stay. And finally, the art and science of sequencing. So to recap, functional form is that if my body's integrity is a certain way in its natural order, then perhaps when I do an inhale and I reach up for a lateral extension, this could be where I feel the stretch. And with my breath, I can bring more pranic body, more prana, life force to my body. And this gives me great benefit. But for another individual, that individual might need a further lateral stretch to get the same benefit. So form is really important in adapting to the individual. You don't have to, function is really important. You don't have to achieve the perfect form. You can just do the functional value of the posture and acquire the great benefits of it. Breath and adaptation. Breath is fundamental to link the body and the mind. And so if I inhale, sweep my arms up from my shoulders, I'm being aware of my movement, notice my pause, and exhale, draw my belly in as I sweep down my arms. I'm achieving extension in the spine, and I'm engaging in my stabilizing muscles of my spine. So it's subtle, but it's very powerful. The third concept of Viniyoga is this repetition and stay. So I have a client in New Hampshire that has rotator cuff injuries in both shoulders. So with repetition, we would inhale, we extend our arms out to a T, lift our chest, ascending our crown, and as we exhale, we bring the arms behind our head and back, just like that. And we repeat this repetition through the breath, wrapping the movement with the breath, meaning as I inhale, I then move, and as I exhale, I then move. And when I'm not moving, I'm noticing and being aware of the pauses in between my breath. And this repetition corrects any misalignment that I have in my muscular structure. And then I stay, and this stay is fundamental in holding the posture in a way that purifies my body right here for several breaths and observing my breath and being present. And finally, the fourth concept of Viniyoga is the art and the science of sequencing. And so Jessica Char and Gary Kraftsow created this scientific way to move and warm up the body and integrate movements in the way that makes you feel whole and complete at the end of your practice.
And I'm wondering, what are some other typical types of injuries that you see frequently? And just thinking in that direction and wondering, are there any other types of movements that we can share with our audience that might be beneficial for them to try out?
Well, I would love to share a very safe practice for a common aches and pain, which is for the computer user, usually the neck tension and the shoulder tension, the trapezius area. So a wonderful way of beginning a practice is to arrive to the present moment and check in with ourselves. So this is a great opportunity to use mindfulness and meditation to check in. So before you practice yoga, set a wonderful, inspiring intention for yourself, whatever that is. It could be a goal, a mentor. I personally like the intention of beginning with a beginner's mind, setting our mind for openness, freshness, and creativity, and also setting an intention of pure motive that I'm practicing out of love for myself. So that would be an example of setting that good intention. And then checking in with my breath, my contacts to the earth, my hip alignment relative to my shoulders, so shoulders stacked over hips. My head is centered in between my shoulders. My crown is ascended. My chest is lifted. My heart is blooming. My ears are open. So that's taking a moment to check in and then coming to the breath and observing the breath. And most common ailment that can be addressed with a neck strain or neck tension is just to inhale one arm. In this case, let's say your right arm. Inhale, then move. Noticing the pause of the breath here, and then exhale, pushing that arm away, and then turning the gaze to the opposite direction and moving the gaze down toward the floor. And then inhaling the other arm, feeling tall and lifted, crown ascended, moving with the breath. And then exhale, pushing that arm away, gazing to the other side and moving the gaze down as I bring the arm down, drawing the belly into the spine. This is the repetition part. We just do this part. Inhale, exhale 3 to 4 times, alternating arms, opposite gaze, just like that. And then we incorporate stay, which is one of the feature of Viniyoga. On this next one, let's say you do 3 to 4 times, and then you just simply stay and hold the stay position for a while, allowing the side of my neck to stretch. And after a few breaths, observing the breath, deep, reliable, smooth breath without straining, I simply move to the other side, turn to the opposite gaze, and hold it here and stretch on this side. So we want to time this side about the same time as the other side, just to keep our neck balanced. So that would be a wonderful practice. And if you like to close it with 2 arm sweeps, inhale, lift, feeling tall, bringing air to the spine, and exhale, bringing chin to throat a little bit and stretching our cervical vertebrae right here. And do a few times, a few repetitions, and followed by a stay. So that's just a synopsis of it. I kind of went fast there, but you get the idea.
That was super awesome. I could already feel a great stretch in my neck and my arm just by doing a couple of those movements. So I'm definitely going to try that later. Thank you for that. So I'm wondering, what was your training like to learn how all these different movements and how it interacts with the body?
Well, 2 key teachers in my life come to mind about my training, and there were a few surprises. So my first Viniyoga teacher was John Wilson. He's a director of the Seattle Recovery Cafe. And here was the wonderful testing ground for me to teach yoga, Viniyoga, to the members of the Seattle Recovery Cafe. So my teacher, John Wilson, equipped me in teaching for equity. I was teaching very vulnerable populations of Seattle. They're very fragile. They come from a history of trauma, and they've applied to declare sobriety and recovery. And through that, they have access to all these healing modalities that's available at the Recovery Cafe. And so I was very fortunate to teach very vulnerable populations at this cafe. So I learned to teach yoga to individuals who are cancer survivors, who are suffering from Parkinson's disease, for example. One woman came in with a wheelchair. We have a number of members who suffer from substance use and alcohol use, and members who suffer from mental illness as well as homelessness. And so because of the fragility of this population, I quickly learned how to be very safe and design my yoga practice that is adaptable and available and approachable to this population. So that was very cool to have that kind of background teaching for equity. My second teacher is Tracy Weber, and John pushed me to get a second certification through Tracy, who was his teacher. And Tracy really dwell on the purity of Viniyoga, sticking with the lineage of Viniyoga, ensuring that it's safe, approachable, reachable for everyone. And essentially, I'm able to design a practice that is the right practice for the individual in terms of length, intensity, and orientation. I can achieve exactly what the practitioner is looking for. So Mark, if you're looking for shoulder injury recovery, then I would design exactly the sequence for that. And if you have time constraint and you can only practice in the morning for 30 minutes, then I ensure that my design meets your time constraint and allow you to work on it in the morning. So my design on the breath will be different because you're just arising in the morning. So I will bring the breath in a gentle way so it helps you wake up in the morning and gives you more energy.
What do sessions with you look like from start to finish? Do you have a certain amount of times that's needed per week, or can it be stretched out for multiple weeks to months in order to address an issue?
For depending on the situation of the individual, a private session, I could potentially design a practice after 6 sessions or so. And this particular individual I'm thinking about, as an example, had a fused vertebrae. And so she was definitely very fragile in her low back. And so we had to make sure that we don't irritate her low back. So forward bends are out of the question, a standing, for example. And so I would say, depending on the situation, minimum, I would say for private session would be 4 sessions. And I think 6 session is probably better. But currently, right now, I have couples yoga private sessions where I'm teaching 2 partners who wants to have a football fit body in a few months. And the other partner wanted something that was reducing her stress from work, helping her manage her weight, and also helping her with her hip mobility. And so I was teaching those 2, and that required about 10 weeks total to teach them both simultaneously and tailoring to their individual bodies. And so the male, Terry, had 1 set of sequence, and the partner, Teresa, had another set of sequence, and I can teach them simultaneously, and that took some time. And I'm happy to announce that they are progressing really well.
How do people normally find out about Viniyoga? I personally haven't found out about it until I met you, and I understood the power of it immediately because I can't tell you how many times I've hurt myself just doing yoga, trying to sit in a lotus style, like pushing my legs down, like keeping my back straight, and just like using more of like a sports mentality and just going as hard as I can in yoga. And I quickly realized that that's not the best way to approach yoga.
Well, please don't do that anymore. Don't push yourself into the form. So there is a school of thought that the mastery of the form of the posture is the goal, but in Viniyoga, it's the function. And so choose a sitting position that is most natural to your body. It feels naturally in the order that it's built, designed with integrity. So in Viniyoga, we don't engage in a posture that causes pain because the parasympathetic system, nervous system, is what we want to engage and tap into to let our body naturally heals itself and repairs itself. And so when you're strained and feeling pain, we're actually in the sympathetic system, which is fight or flight or freeze. And that is not where healing begins. So we want you to be as relaxed and comfortable as possible. So I encourage you to explore perhaps a Burmese seated pose where you're sitting cross-legged, but you could open your feet out a little bit more. You're kind of like in a diamond shape, and it's not necessary for you to get into a perfect half lotus like this.
How do people find out about Viniyoga?
It's amazing. As of 2015, 21 million people, Westerners, participate in yoga, and the same amount of people also in that year, according to the National Health Institute, meditate. And within that group would be Viniyoga, and I don't have the exact numbers, but people find Viniyoga by looking for teachers at the studio. I think people who are concerned about safety and they have injuries, they seem to already tap into that. They do their own research online, and Viniyoga is actually well known as the most gentle of different styles of yoga. So it doesn't take much for you to Google, safe styles of yoga, and Viniyoga pops up.
Awesome. So you mentioned a little bit about mindfulness and meditation and how that works into a yoga practice. And some of our audience members are just beginning to understand mindfulness and just starting to practice meditation. I'm wondering if you could share a bit about how those work within yoga and perhaps how it benefits, how they play along with each other.
Yoga helps us learn how to still the mind and to unify our consciousness. And yoga is not new. It's been around for 5,000 years. And how I incorporate mindfulness and meditation in yoga is first setting a positive intention to your practice, which is a deliberate intention of something that inspires you, that keeps you going and keeps it fresh and new for you. So that's the beginning. And then once we begin the practice, we always move with the breath. So we initiate our inhale and do our movement. So I'll just show you this lateral movement. So I inhale and I reach over and I stretch out my rib cage, and I exhale and I bring my arm back to the original position. I'm moving with the breath. And so I'm engaging my awareness of my breath in the foreground, and in the background, I'm noticing, I notice feeling of tightness here on my rib cage. And my left rotator cuff, which is an old injury of mine, is pulsating and vibrating. So as I'm moving into my posture, I'm utilizing expanded awareness, paying attention to my own breath, paying attention to my own body sensations. And it's really easy to notice the sensations as I'm moving. So you could move the other arm and notice, oh, I even feel the contact of the cloth, the skin, the clothing on my skin. That's a sensation as well. Or the sensation of my breath touching the upper lip. That's also a sensation. I'm just beginning to become in tune with myself. And this is a wonderful opportunity to go through self-discovery. So throughout the practice, we'd be focusing on our breath, our movement, our body sensations, staying grounded and stable, and smile along the way. And in closing of the practice, I take you to either a supine by laying on your back, a supine pose, or you can sit on a cushion like this or on a chair. If you can't get down on the mat, we can modify it to a chair. And we return to the breath, return to the body sensations in complete stillness, totally melting into the earth and feeling fully alert, fully aware of our breath and our body sensations, and feeling the transformation of becoming whole.
I'm thinking about how the breath really helps with mobility. And I've noticed that when I'm doing yoga and paying attention to my breath at the same time, it allows me to get into a deeper stretch. For example, it definitely helps me when I'm aware of my breath and how I'm moving my body at the same time.
Earlier, I mentioned that there is layers of you, Mark. There's the physical you, which we can use the tool of the asanas, the yoga movements, to tap into the physical you. And the breath is the energetic you. This is the next level in. And that's the energy system through the breath, which the ancients of yoga called it the prana, the life force, or pranayama, the breath also mean life force. And so pertaining to your question, you had mentioned earlier that you have tight hips. So if we were to do a hip opening supine pose, for example, which I would first warm you up from the mat to kneeling to standing, back to kneeling, down to your back to the mat, just to get your body warmed up and moving. And then we come down to your back and we work on opening your hip. This is a great opportunity where I would invite you to bring the breath on the inhale. As the breath is coming in, you direct the life force through your intention and attention, directing the breath to your hip. Probably add your IT band that pulls on your knee and bring your attention to your knee. If you're feeling the tightness in your knee and the hip, they're usually related. So I would guide you through breathing in the breath and targeting the breath to go to the areas that need a deep stretch. And the breath is the life force. It is very powerful. And having a deep breath and massaging the area of concern with your breath is powerful. And then actually imagining that you're holding the nutrients of the oxygen and the air in those areas and then exhaling out the carbon dioxide, the toxins out, literally imagining that and then bringing in the breath and massaging the area of concern. So that's how we ensure a deep stretch. And if you remember earlier, we talked about the feature of Viniyoga where we utilize repetition and stay. The deep breath that you're referring to is very well suited for the stay part. So we'll do a few contraction, extension of your hips. We'll move back and forth, and then we'll stay there in the stretch and then directing the breath to those areas of concern. And that will feel very deep, and it's a purification process and very transformational for your body.
Thank you for that, Judy. So thank you for your time. And to close off our session together today to talk about Viniyoga and yourself, what's your final takeaway for our audience?
I invite you to try it if you've never tried yoga. And I would love to be your teacher, but there's many great teachers out there. Yoga is for everyone. I teach yoga for kids. My youngest client is 2.5-year-old. Atlas. He's super cute, and we do storytelling to get him engaged. I teach yoga for teens, for the general population, for vulnerable and marginalized population, as well as seniors. It's for everyone. Everyone can try it, and it doesn't matter your cultural background, your race, or your religion. Yoga is accessible and approachable for everyone. So I invite you to do that. If you want a personal transformation through yoga, bring your favorite ritual with you. If you practice certain faiths, bring the ritual that means so much to you from that faith, and that can be integrated to yoga practice, and that will keep your practice alive and fresh and new, and you will go through a natural transformation toward greater balance and strength and flexibility.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Judy. Thank you for being with us today. And thank you, audience, for being here as well. We'll catch you all next time.